to ask.
Bingo, we've got it.
Great.
Thanks to everyone who made it happen. So I'm Rochelle Lefkowitz, and I am the chair of a part of Ashby Village called Elder Action. And I'm just delighted that everybody is here to experiment with this kind of pilot intergenerational climate book group. And I want to first just thank Rebecca, who has been doing a lot of the planning with me and with MA to make sure that this experience is exceptional. And having all of you here, I think will make sure. So I want to start off with just an explanation, a quick one of Ashby Village for people who don't know. And then Rebecca is going to chime in and give us an explanation of when, so we all have that sense on all ends. So I want to start off by saying Ashby Village is a vibrant, warm, and welcoming 13-year-old East Bay nonprofit of interdependent adults over 60. And we're transforming together how we age in our homes and neighborhoods. We now have about 400 members and more than 300 volunteers. And together we find new ways of connecting, and we find and take opportunities and support for meaningful, engaging, and in this case, and others, increasingly intergenerational experiences. So that gives you a little handle on what Ashby Village does. And I'm also the chair of a component of it called Elder Action, which is, as it sounds, it enables all of us who really would like to have some role in the way the world is coming together, falling apart, or ways that we are getting a future that we, at least most of us, were not expecting. So we do a lot together because very often the myth is that older adults, we just have kind of had our time and really don't have a whole lot in the way of assets to offer. And I think you're going to find out, if you would all believe anything like that, that tonight will show you otherwise. So Rebecca, we would love a little thumbnail sketch of our colleagues here.
Great. Thanks, Rochelle. Yeah, happy to be here and really excited that Women's Environmental Network is co-hosting this event, and welcoming Margaret, who wrote this wonderful book that we're going to talk about. And so our mission is basically that WEN creates and empowers a community of women or female identifying individuals working to protect the environment. Typically we're based in the Bay Area, San Francisco Bay Area, and we've actually been around for over 2 decades. So we're a pretty tenured organization, and over time, how we've done that mission and contributed to that work has varied just based on who's involved. We are completely volunteer run, and kind of the primary activities that we've been focused on over the past couple of years is really networking, career building, and leadership development. So potential roles in the environment, jobs in the environment, getting to know each other. And one thing that we really, fostered the last couple of years is a book club. So in addition to this kind of special book club that we're doing tonight, we do have kind of our own book club that we run with meetings every 6 to 8 weeks or so. And we pick a different book every time. We meet in person typically in both San Francisco and East Bay. And so excited to continue kind of doing that. And if anyone is welcome. So if folks from Ashby Village would like to be part of that, you're more than welcome as well. And happy to send out details on that too. So that's subscribers, and we send out various.
Rebecca, you're breaking up if you can hear us, and you're frozen.
And resources to them. And no,
it's still breaking up.
Okay. Better?
Maybe
no?
Try shutting off your video.
Okay. Is that better a little bit?
You disappeared.
Okay. I disappeared, but hopefully you can hear me. I was done. I was almost wrapping up anyways, but yeah, really excited for Wen to be part of this, and hopefully my internet will be better tonight. But with that, I'll pass it back to you, Rochelle.
Ooh, I'm not getting it.
Thank you. And hopefully my internet isn't receiving any vibrations from yours. So what I would like to quickly do, because she has been kind enough on the East Coast to be joining us this evening, is introduce the author of this incredible book. So Margaret Klein Solomon is a clinical psychologist turned climate activist, and her goal is to galvanize a more urgent and more effective climate movement. She's been a fundraiser, despite how that once scared her. And she's now the executive director of the Climate Emergency Fund. She lives in Brooklyn and has agreed to stay up late tonight to be with us. So I want to thank you, Margaret, and turn this over to you for a little bit. We're going to be asking you to speak some, but also to answer some questions that we've got and make sure that we've got time to answer some questions, at least 3 from the audience who's real excited that you're here. So we want to make sure that we give ample time to the breakout rooms also. So we want to have this portion of things really extend into, I'd say, about 20 minutes of 8. So Margaret, you're on.
Thanks so much, Rochelle and everyone. As I might be a little bit slower than usual because it is 10 here, but I'm going to do my best. As Rochelle mentioned, I'm a clinical psychologist turned climate activist. This is some of what I'm going to say is going to be repetition for those who read the book, but about 10 years ago here in New York City, I was finishing my PhD when I had a kind of climate freak out. My just level of alarm was just growing and growing to the point of being pretty all-consuming. And then I had a kind of climate conversion experience where I just realized that I will do everything that I can to protect humanity in the living world, to cancel the apocalypse. And one of the really critical things for me to go from freaking out to taking on this mission, which has been so animating for me over the past 10 years and such a salve to my continued extremely high climate anxiety, is raising my expectations to the idea of, let's try and go all the way, right? Let's not just try to, limit the damage or like be a small part of a larger movement or whatever. Like, doesn't it make sense to set the goal to do everything that we can to save as much life as possible, and restore anything that we can that's already been lost. So since then, the past 10 years have been an incredible roller coaster. I would basically say I've spent them in a extended flow state where just working and building organizations and working with activists and writing this book. And really what this book represents is the bringing together of my psychological experience and my experience as an activist and what I've seen and what I've studied there. While I stopped being a clinical psychologist, I don't practice, I don't see patients anymore. I still obviously have that mindset. And from the beginning, I've felt for the last 10 years, I've had the same basic approach, which is we are in a state of mass delusion of normalcy. People are acting normal, but in fact, there's an emergency. And this is incredibly dangerous to be the situation to be in. And if we fix just that basic dissonance, right, and start to treat this emergency like an emergency on an individual and organizational and then ultimately national and international level, then it's like night and day. And I have no hope for what we can accomplish in normal mode. The climate emergency is so advanced. Even this year, it's just shocking. It's accelerating. It's always surprising me that, oh my gosh, this record is broken. The ocean temperature is so high. The sea ice is so low. I have no hope that we can solve this emergency through normal politics or normal mode of functioning. We have to switch into emergency mode like we did during World War II after Pearl Harbor. And then once we do that, then I have every hope, because we can accomplish such amazing things when we're in that mode. So I hope that's the kind of overview you were looking for, Rochelle, and I'm happy to take questions.
And I think, I wanted to make sure that we really got a chance, because you are here with us in person, before we take questions. If there's anything that's not in the book that you want to let us know before all of us come forward with what we'd love to ask you, that'd be terrific.
Thank you. Yeah, I thought about this one a lot, and what I landed on is what I want to share with you all is how hard this book has been and promoting it. This is the second edition. So I've been through this now twice, and I feel so strongly about this book's power to help people, and I hope you all feel some of that. And I get very positive feedback. This book really helped me. This book, inspired me, this kind of thing. But what's so challenging to me is how hard it is to get people to read books, and also self-promotion just in general is a challenging thing. It's telling people, read my book. It's like, whatever. It doesn't come easily to me. So on that note, I wanted to nudge anyone who enjoyed the book who enjoyed or felt helped by the book, to consider taking on a bit of a role of like evangelist, or to share this book with other people, or to like write a review on Amazon or on Goodreads, or post about it on social media, or any of these things, because I think it deserves to be read. And it's just Rochelle knows, she's been in PR for many years. It's just very, very hard to do.
Well, thanks. Much appreciated. And yes, having done that for 26 years, it takes a lot more effort now even than it did back in that day. So I know, Emma, you've been looking at some of the questions, if there are questions in the chats. And if you haven't seen questions to start us off with, I know, Rebecca, you had something on your mind that you want to share. So Emma, have we got?
There are no questions. So if anybody has a question and you're too shy to raise your little yellow hand and be Mickey Mouse, you can put it in the chat and I will notice it. Or you can put up your Mickey Mouse hand, and then it sounded like, and Rebecca is going to role model for us. Okay, Rebecca.
Awesome, thanks. Yeah, and others, of course, feel free to raise your hand after and unmute. Yeah, Margaret, super helpful intro. I guess my question, you talk about the state of emergency and having hope in that way versus like in normal mode and not being hopeful that way. I'm curious, and you touched on this a little bit in the book, and it actually, especially between the first one, which I listened to you read, and then the second edition. But how do you kind of put, like, how do you balance, I guess is the word, between, emergency mode and not like having burnout, like making sure that people feel the sense of urgency and are really, really committed, but also aren't so, that they don't burn out. I'm curious what your thoughts are on that. Or doing it sustainably, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's a really important question. And I think for everyone, it's a bit different. It's a ultimately a very personal question about about what people need to support themselves in, financially, right? That's a important question for making your climate activism plan, right? Where is the money going to come from? But also how people can support themselves, in their mental health and with their ability to rest. One thing that I keep in mind is that, even soldiers serving in a war get R&R, rest and relaxation. It's a totally necessary part of human life that, sustains us over time. So, personally speaking, having 2 dogs is my primary, let's say, distraction. But yeah, again, everyone's different. Everyone's family is different. Everyone's hobbies and interests are different. I guess another thing just that pretty much everyone should be engaged in is, some level of physical activity that being able to enjoy and move your body is, never stops being important. For me, it's really, I am very attached to the idea of living in truth. And I don't like to or I have a hard time putting it out of my mind or saying let's forget about all of that for the evening or whatever. And so I like to focus on activities where I don't have to be inauthentic, like playing with the dogs or my 3-year-old niece or whatever, where I can be outside of it, but it's engaging in a way that's still authentic and not doesn't contain denial.
Thanks.
I'm happy to report we have 4 questions coming, which is just about what we have time for. So I'm going to call on people in the order that you raised your hand or put it in. So Amy.
Hi. Thanks so much for the book and for being here tonight. You wrote the first edition some years ago, and now you've upgraded, so you've met with tons of people across the country. I'm curious, since most of us are not like Mr. Tompkins of Patagonia, who was able to do something magical, and Larry Kramer, you gave a great example of ACT UP and being all in terms of what we do. But for general people like all of us, young and old, what have you seen, or where have you seen, say, the most impact, the kind of group, or the parts of the world perhaps where people have had the greatest impact, to give us even additional ideas about what we might do and where we might go? Thank you.
Yeah. That's a great question. It's a very challenging question because there's so many, it's a social movement ecosystem, right? And so there's the activists and groups who are on the front lines, doing actions and potentially getting arrested and, taking on some physical and legal risks. But then there's also people supporting them in all kinds of ways, planning and cooking for activists and keeping their books and I really, I mean, when I was at Extinction Rebellion in London, when they were just getting started, they had they had an office, which was very cool, full of volunteers, and they would have a volunteer masseuse come into the office and give activists massages. So there's so many ways to contribute. As I write in the book, and this is the biggest change from the first edition to the second edition, is that I have become convinced of the unique power of disruptive climate activism, as opposed to like working within the system through, for example, petitions or like permitted marches, for example. So for one group in the United States that I'm very excited about, it's a new group called the Climate Defiance in Washington, D.C. They yell down fossil fuel supporting politicians from their keynote addresses or their book talks or their panel presentations. And it's, I mean, in some ways it's quite simple. I mean, and this, you know, yelling at politicians is like a tactic as old as time, but it's incredibly effective. I mean, just the willingness to kind of break the social norms, right? The idea we're all supposed to sit here and listen or whatever. It just has so much power in it. And it really, I mean, yeah, you can organize for 100 non-disruptive events, but, you know, being willing to one time get just, you know, 10 people together and go, you know, yell at Senator Joe Manchin or whatever. It's, I'm continually impressed by how quickly that can change the narrative, and just linking that up with what I was talking about earlier about emergency mode versus normal mode. I think this is really kind of the core of why, is that, like, for example, Peter Kalmus, a NASA scientist who's also an activist, he said that taking direct action, he chained himself to a branch of Chase Bank he took this action with the group Scientist Rebellion. He said that that was his most impactful act of climate communication ever. And this is someone who's written books and talks and papers. But it's like, it's a demonstration, right? Why would a climate scientist from NASA chain themselves to a bank? It must be because he's that alarmed and concerned and passionate. It really, you know, show don't tell. It shows rather than tells the extremity of the situation. So I know it's kind of an inconvenient answer, right? An inconvenient truth that of how effective disruptive activism is, if you're like me, not so predisposed to that as a stylistic or yeah, it's just whatever. I've followed rules my whole life. The idea of whatever, throwing soup on a painting, it feels very, very foreign to me. But I've just become convinced that it is the most effective way and the fastest way to create transformative change. So I think that I would push people to move beyond their personal preferences about what feels comfortable, and try to find a role in the disruptive climate movement that works for you.
Thanks. Okay, Elizabeth.
Yeah, well, thank you very much. And that was a fabulous answer that you just gave. Very, very helpful. And in part, I think answers what my question was, which was in chapter 1 of your book in particular, you talk about the challenges of remaining in the normal mode, including intellectualization and compartmentalization and other things like that. And you went from studying for your PhD to suddenly going into this incredible climate anxiety. And my question is, how do we in the Northern Hemisphere, where we do not experience the eco-apartheid in the same way you discussed as in the Southern Hemisphere or other parts of the world, how do we make it real when we are so comfortable? What was it that pushed you from being involved in an intellectual thing over to this passion?
Yeah, thank you. I think that it's because of my ability, which is somewhat trauma informed, but my ability to look into the future and really feel the danger there. Lisa Van Susteren, a psychiatrist, talks about pre-traumatic stress disorder, that young people and many people look at what's coming and can imagine what's going to happen to them and their family and humanity as a whole and other species. And it's I think that's important to do. I think that trying to, it's like the opposite of what our psychology, our internal defenses. It's the opposite of what they want us to do. But I think really trying to push yourself to imagine how bad things could get, and not just for other people, but for you and your family, the people you love the most. It's devastatingly painful, but it's also, I think, necessary to help motivate that shift into real emergency mode.
Thank you.
Great.
I think we have time for,
Well, I think we're going to do, there's all this chatting going on here that I'm trying to accommodate. We're going to go a few more minutes. We have 2 questions in the chat and 1 more on the screen. So yeah, I think we can probably get through them. So the next question is actually in the chat, and it's from Julie Freestone. How do we balance the many priorities we've already taken on? Abortion rights, immigrant rights, police reform, saving democracy, and so much more. I get a dozen emails every hour.
Yeah, well, thank you for your political engagement, right? These are all important issues. There's certainly so much that's going wrong with our country at this time. For me, this is not challenging, but I'll try to put myself in your shoes. For me, it's it's like an obsession or something. All this stuff about all kinds of stuff, the Trump impeachment, or the Russian coup, or the submersible, or whatever, these big media stories, even important ones. I watch very peripherally, because I'm just trying to stay as tuned in as I can to the overarching story, which is so huge. The climate emergency is epic in scale. Biblical in scale. You can hardly find words large enough to actually capture what we're talking about. So for me, it's it's kind of the whole show. But I think, I don't know, I guess I think that I can remember when I felt this way, that it can also feel a little bit boring. Like, oh, look at this new chart about ocean temperature. You know, like this is not, I mean, whatever, I'm not a scientist. This isn't, yeah, just something that comes, there's something that inherently is exciting. But yeah, so I think trying to zoom out from any kind of specifics around climate, like any study or, you know, policy debate, or, you know, or should we be pro-nuclear power, anti-nuclear power, just zooming out from that and trying to keep in mind just the huge sweep, and that, and keeping in mind that, you know, our economy and politics are totally dependent on our climate and our biosphere. Like, for example, as I'm sure you all know, State Farm recently announced that they won't be writing new policies in California for home insurance anymore. This is huge, right? This is just the first one. The insurance industry is in, I mean, is just facing insurmountable challenges, which is going to be true very soon of every sector, every economic sector. So yeah, so I think by trying to zoom out, keep a sense of scale, and yeah, for me, it kind of makes the other issues fade away. I mean, and we can keep in mind that they're important. There's so much that goes into making a good society and so much that we need to accomplish. But again, none of that is possible in where we're going in terms of temperature. It will not happen. So it's the emergency transformation to reach zero emissions and restore a safe climate is the single most important thing we could do to achieve any political aim, such as body autonomy, and right to choose. That, yeah, that at 2 degrees of warming, such freedoms will be almost irrelevant.
Okay,
Roberta was next. Rochelle, did you want to?
I just wanted to make sure that we had time for Roberta and another question as well.
Yes,
I'm going to ask you, Margaret, to the degree you're sensitive to people waiting to ask you things, we watch the time. And people will laugh who know me because I am always taking up way too much time.
okay, Roberta. You're on mute.
You're on mute. I'm unmuted. Hi, thank you so much for your book and for your passion. And I couldn't disagree with anything you wrote, except for I have some real concerns about the analogy with World War II. So in other words, the idea of getting us all together, working together in a coalition in terms of this important issue. And I would agree with Julie that there's so many competing, incredibly important issues, and I don't even know how to begin to prioritize them, but they're all important. And I think sometimes they can overwhelm us all. But I also feel that there's an even greater threat to trying to do this, because unlike World War II, where we pretty much got all our information from the same place, we are such a divided country. And we get our information or our disinformation in 2 different silos. And when you have climate deniers doing that, not doing that, when you have climate, I'm sorry, the phone is ringing. When you get climate deniers getting their information that reinforces their denial, and that it's fed by the fossil fuel industry that encourages that kind of denial, I think we're facing a much bigger challenge than maybe comes through in your book in terms of how you create a coalition under these conditions.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with that, you know, we're kind of postmodern, post-truth media environment where we've got our social media bubbles and everything we're seeing is, you know, run through the algorithm. It's a really serious problem. I would say that I kind of think of it in terms of concentric circles moving outwards, that I think the climate movement spends too much time and energy focused on going to the outside of the circle, right? The climate deniers first, and saying, you know, they're the problem, let's deal with them. Whereas I think we should focus more on the inside of the circle, the small central circles. And some people say this is preaching to the choir, but actually, I mean, even among progressives, even among people who take climate seriously as an issue, I see tremendous denial. And it's not this kind, you know, it's not, this is just a natural cycle, you know, there's always been warming, whatever. It's not that kind of denial, but it's denial of, well, it's a terrible problem, but what can I do? I'm just going to live my life, keep my head down and hope for the best. Or the denial of, it's people have a thousand ways to avoid being realistic about this, and that's understandable because it is overwhelming and terrifying. But I think that if we enter emergency mode as, you know, the disruptive climate movement, and then we can branch out to, you know, the more general progressive politics and other movements, and then branch out from that to like the Democratic Party, that is how you can create a real base of support for drastic transformative climate action that can ultimately overwhelm the remaining few actual deniers in a you know, just the tide of politics.
Thanks.
Okay, we're at a little decision point. I need help from my co-planners here. We have a couple more questions, one that a couple people were interested in, but we are rapidly losing our time in the small group. And so Rochelle and Rebecca, do we want to ask another question, or do we want to close out this so that we have time to get into our groups of 6 and be able to do some reflection and conversation with each other?
Well, I'm not sure how to answer that because I'm not sure about the nature of the question and how complex the time would be in answering it.
Yeah, I think it's the last one in the chat, just about Tina asked about like specific examples of positive results of disruptive climate action. Maybe we can end on that. That's maybe a nice way to end. And then Margaret, we should let you get to bed. And then maybe in a couple minutes, we can do the breakouts.
And we'd be happy to tell you, Margaret, about what we learn from each other. And maybe if there's a question or two that you'd have time to answer at another time.
Yeah, that sounds perfect.
So Emma, can you?
So specific examples of positive outcomes that came from disruptive activities. I know you talked about Extinction Rebellion. Don't need to repeat what's in the book, but if there are other examples US or otherwise, where there's been positive outcomes from the disruptive actions?
Totally. Yeah, I see them all the time. It's the government will never say, ever, we're doing this to appease the protesters. We're doing this because the protesters have put so much pressure on us, we can't take it. So you can't expect that. But when you look at, for example, in the United Kingdom, the group Insulate Britain was blocking roads and otherwise disrupting normalcy for about 8 months. And then in late 2021 and 2022, and then calling for thermal insulation of housing to reduce energy use and lower energy costs. And then the United Kingdom announced the Great Britain Insulation Scheme, dedicating £1 billion for thermal insulation. Now, again, they didn't credit the activists, but what this group did, this small group, this new group, what they did was raise the salience of the issue with the public, and then with the media and with the politicians. Another example, and Europe is the movement there is more advanced than what we have here. I'd love to see the US movement grow in this direction. But so a grantee of the Climate Emergency Fund supported group in Europe in Spain called Future Vegetable, Futuro Vegetal, was doing disruptive protests for about 6 months. Again, getting in the media, causing a ruckus, very controversial. And then the Spanish government banned the building of new factory farms for cattle. They banned large-scale cattle farms. And this blocked what was going to be the largest dairy farm in Europe. So, and again, why did they do that? What caused that? I mean, this group just raised the salience of the issue of animal agriculture to new heights. And that's really what the activists can do, what disruptive activism can do in a way and at a speed that I haven't seen anything else.
Those are really great examples to close on, Margaret. We are so grateful to you for giving us your time, and you can tell by all the questions which are still coming in that people are really engaged with the topic, and you've definitely told us ways we can help you advance this mission. So we'll all take our books and share them with our friends, and we can't thank you enough.
Well, back at you, everyone. Thank you so much, especially Rochelle and Felix. Thank you so much for your support and encouragement. So,
and again, thanks for joining us and for writing in ways that really get us to think, whether we often do or seldom do, in new ways. Thank you.
All right, I'm off to bed. I'm looking forward to hearing how the breakout sessions go. Okay.
Okay.
Happy to share.
Thanks, Margaret.
Bye. Thank you.
Awesome. So great. Well, that was great, and appreciate everyone's questions. Monica has graciously agreed to be Zoom wizard, and so she has made breakout rooms of about 5 people each. So we'll have about 6 groups of 5. And I know a couple of people just had to hop. So she's going to send us into those. Rochelle, MA, I'm thinking we can come back around 8:10, 8:15. So we'll have about 20, 25 minutes in there. And then we'll do kind of a wrap up and next steps. So you all will get a pop-up on the screen in a second when Monica clicks the button, and just click I think it'll automatically put you in them, but you can click like join breakout room. And she'll stay in the main room in case we have any stragglers.
Thanks.
So you all should see this room pop up here. Cool. And then I'm going to pause the recording.
5 or 10 minutes to just hear from people about any particular highlight that stood out in your group. Maybe you assigned someone to give the highlight, or maybe that was a dismal failure. I'm not speaking for anyone in particular. And then we'll have about 5 minutes at the end to talk about kind of what we want to do next. We don't see this as something that's ending. So do any of the groups want to say a little bit about what you heard that stuck with you, food for thought, something you
I
haven't
can.
talked about? Who's that?
It's Laura.
Oh, hi, Laura.
Hey. So as much as I am not a fan of report outs, because I think you kind of lose the juice of what was talked about, we did have a lovely conversation, and a couple things that stayed with me and struck us was just leaning into fully feeling and acknowledging the grief and despair and pain is, unless we can do that and fight for the joy, it's hard to find the energy. And the second thing was that there's both disruptive work that may very well have powerful leverage on policy, but there's also ways we can be building new models and new possibilities of consuming and healing and agriculture, et cetera. And I think the third was an encouragement to just take the next elegant step, that whether it's individual or collective, the best antidote to anxiety is action. So I think we're all hoping to do one thing differently or more or something as a result of having invested even this hour and a half. Those were a couple things.
That was great. I love that you brought up joy and one thing we can each do as a result. That's great. Anybody else want to share a couple things? Rachel?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. There are 3 people. I noticed Rachel's hand, and then Manjula. Am I saying that right? And then I think Jen. Go ahead, Rachel.
So our group ended in a very similar place, but I think we all were kind of not a fan of the fear-based pathway there. So that's just kind of an interesting divergence. I think we talked a lot about how to just, like, once you start taking action, then it's kind of a cycle of like feeling positively and kind of some of the emotions that you described. So I just wanted to bounce off of what you said, Laura.
Thanks, Rachel.
Great, thank you.
I can quickly summarize. So we had similar reaction like Laura, but in addition, our team, especially our Ashby Village partners, we wanted to do something concrete with these partnerships that we have across generations, and we wanted to partner on a few projects that we could work together with Ashby Village as a volunteer, or so I think the next step is to figure out how the VEN members can work more closely with Ashby Village and participate in some of their projects. So how can we actually reach out to them and then participate with them? And then if Elizabeth, did you want to add anything?
No, I think that was where we ended up, which was the excitement of not so much helping Ashby Village, but of intergenerational activity and identifying as a group, maybe 4 or 5 projects, and then honing down on ones that perhaps are local and start local.
That's terrific. What an action-oriented group. And then Jen, did you have your hand up? Yes. No?
Applause emoji.
Oh, you were applauding. Okay, well, say something since I called on you.
I see that Mary Lee is unmuted, and I hope that she will chime in on our behalf.
Oh. Okay, Mary Lee.
we spent some time looking at the issue of all the issues that we're facing and all the issues that we, at Ashby Village and as a society are dealing with. And, you can count them on many fingers, and not feeling the overwhelm. And how do you feel a sense of, how do you get, acknowledge the issues and the complexity, but yet have intentionality and clarity about how you can help and what you can do. And I shared, and Jen had the great idea of, finding ways to work collectively with organizations that are actually engaged in doing, being part of that collective action, that it is empowering. And I shared experience I had with Ashby Village folks at dinner last night, where I talked about this book, and people said they really wish that Ashby Village could organize a series of workshops on what people can do. And we would invite Ashby Village members and their kids and their friends, and really have a sort of forum or something of workshops on how you can divest from fossil fuel, how, what can you do about plastics or whatever, but primarily focused on climate and climate action. And so I think there was some sense that, well, gee, that maybe that's something we can do. So, it was a wide spectrum of responses and some really great listening to one another that I was really so happy to see and hear that.
Great. And now, Natalie, you have your hand up, and I think you also had a comment in the chat, so you can cover both. Oh, you're on mute. You're on mute.
Pardon me. Thank you so much. So I'm on the Berkeley Zero Waste Commission, and we have 2 chances for public input coming up because the city is rewriting their zero waste plan. This is a long overdue, very exciting integrated solid waste management plan that Abby and Associates is working with City of Berkeley to write. So our first opportunity for in-person comment on what we should focus on for Berkeley Zero Waste will be this Thursday evening at the South Berkeley Senior Center, and light refreshments will be served. And if you're unable to attend that in person, we also have an online option Wednesday, July 12th. So mark your calendars and reach out to me. I'll put my email also in the chat so I can send you the information if you're not able to save it from the chat right now.
Thank you, Natalie. Are non-Berkeley residents welcome to participate, or is it, okay, so you're looking for outside the city?
Well, I think they'd prefer people who are in the Berkeley area who will be part of the plan and have to face the consequences of what goes into that plan. But if you're curious about what these public comment processes are like, then please show up and show some interest. And I think it'll also be helpful to have outside perspectives if you've seen things work really well in your community or pitfalls that we should avoid in this process.
Great, thank you. I think it looks like we've heard from most groups, and I know, Rochelle, we wanted a few minutes to talk about next steps, and people already did in your groups, which is terrific. So I want to turn it back to Rochelle.
Rochelle, you're muted.
Well, that's not a great beginning. I think that in many ways, at least as I'm hearing from everyone who reported back, it really makes a difference to talk with people from perspectives. I mean, there are people from Ashby Village who also were psychologists, but maybe had a 40-year long perspective as opposed to a 10-year long perspective that Margaret was talking about. And just having the chance in our group when Jolene spoke, the kinds of things she was talking about and the way that she was drawn into the conversation were just so different, and so in their difference thought-provoking that I really do hope we find several ways to keep this conversation going. One of the things that people talked about before we met in the first place was, are there other books, since this was a book group initially, are there other books that we want to think about looking at together? That might be one direction to consider, and either putting in the chat or adding in ways that myself and Rebecca, and hopefully MAU as well, can come together after this and say, okay, what if we got here by the way of next steps that's going to not only keep some of you who have become real engaged this evening connected, but what might expand us to either other parts of WEN or other parts of Ashby Village, or other people in either of those two situations, maybe who can hear some of the recording and be moved either to say, oh, well, I'd like to do this with you all. So that might be one way of starting. I also have another concrete thing in the way that Natalie just explained, that as of tomorrow, there is a KQED forum episode that's going to be all about what should be done with the large pension funds in the state of California that many of us within Ashby Village, even for sure, are actually beneficiaries of. Should there be a new piece of legislation, as is being considered in this episode on radio, but also in the State House, should we make sure there's a requirement that our pension funds, because they don't belong to the people who manage them, they're ours, should those pension funds divest from the investments in fossil fuels they've had? And so I have information, if anyone wants it, of how to either call into the show or email the show or do anything of any number of social media reactions to what you're hearing, so that older adults who are oftentimes considered sort of marginal, not here, this is our money. And it may be something we can help educate some of the other folks about, so that you can talk to other people in your circles of friends, of family, of even financial advisors, people you know who are maybe working on old information. I see Jen. Are you?
Oh, I'm doing that emoji thing again. Sorry.
No, don't be sorry. We're
I
delighted.
can't answer that.
I just wanted to be sure I was seeing it clearly enough and you weren't raising your hand.
I have a question with Shell.
Sure.
You said it's tomorrow on Forum.
Tomorrow on Forum.
And they have I think they have a 9 o'clock and a 10 o'clock, right?
I think it's the earlier one.
The earlier one. Okay.
And I think I was asked if you did want to give any feedback to start at 9:30 so that you could offer that. You weren't the 14th person or 40th person online.
Well, unsurprisingly, this past 90 minutes flew by very, very fast. It's already 8:30. And so really appreciate everyone taking the last hour and a half to be with us. Curious, Rochelle and I may kind of next steps wise, like I'm happy to kind of circle back with the WEN folks. I know a lot of the WEN folks typically come to book group and we're all in touch on Slack and other channels. And I'm sure you are as well. And we can, potentially plan a future event together, or it sounds like already there's lots of events happening that we can invite each other to, which would be great. One other thing too with WEN, I know Ashby Village is specifically a community of 60 plus. For us, we have no age limit, so you're all welcome to be part of WEN, and there's no like membership fee. It's just, if you want to subscribe to our newsletter essentially, and join. We have a Slack community, which is a messaging tool that some of you might be familiar with. So if anyone is interested, by all means, let us know. And I think, Rachel, you put the subscription link for the newsletter in the chat. Maybe you want to do it again, just so people have it. And then that newsletter goes out once a month. And on that, you can also learn kind of how to get involved as well. So.
And we also have a once monthly newsletter, and
we're
delighted to include information in it. I saw in the chat a fleeting question from someone who was maybe new to the area, who didn't know what Forum was, and we don't like trying to
There, it's in there. How about that? Already a response. Go,
Okay.
Jen.
Okay, thank you.
Well, so I have a couple of thoughts. One is the idea for next steps. One is the idea of a book group. And we could, amongst all of us, just circulate books people are interested in and see if there's anything that hits that we'd want to do. But I'm really intrigued with the couple groups that wanted to figure out how to work on things together. That seems to me like that might be a group of 4 or 5 people who would meet separately and just talk about what are things Wen's working on, what are things Ashby Village is interested in, and see if there are any intersections that we could bring back to another meeting. Those are just my thoughts.
Yeah, that sounds great. What we can do as the organizers, I'm the host of this event, and so if people are comfortable, please privately message me if you're not comfortable, but I'm inclined to just share everyone's email that attended this event. So I'll just send basically a note to all 40 people. Please don't reply all, just use it to then separately engage, just so we don't have email,
A dozen
long email
emails in
chains.
an hour.
Yeah, exactly. But happy to just share the kind of the list with everyone and names. And then if you were in breakout groups together, you want to separately connect, then you obviously have the ability to do that.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks, Rebecca. This has been really great. Generational conversations give me hope. Thank you.
Thank you for organizing this. It's been very effective step.
Thank you all for coming. This wouldn't be what it was without all of you. So
I wonder, Rebecca, if is it worth copying the chat? People put so many references in here and I can't seem to copy it. I don't know why.
I can't either.
And
okay. Yeah, I know for webinars you can do that. I'm not sure for.
You usually can with Zoom, but maybe only the host. I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think because we recorded, maybe.
It should save as part of the recording. Oftentimes
Oh,
there's a
good.
text file.
Okay.
Great.
I hope so. Otherwise, I'm not
Hopefully.
sure what there is to be
Yeah.
done. But
Yeah.
cool.
Good. Thank
All
you.
right, awesome.
everybody.
I
It
will
was
stop the
really good.
recording. Thanks, everyone.